how to produce magic sounding vocals for a Christmas song that's been heavily influenced by the sound of 60s and the artists like Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Dan Martin, the classics. When you don't have the access to vintage sounding gear, all you have is your DAW and a microphone that sounds very much modern, but still, you want to fit into the timeless vibe of the track and make your vocals sound magical and Christmassy. So how do you do that?
Yuvelir, Iris, Yuvelir, 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 Iris, Yuvelir. Yeah, Yuvelir, Iris, Yuvelir, 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 Iris, Yuvelir, Yuvelir.
Hi, my name is Iris Yuvelir. I'm a singer, songwriter, and music producer, and today, well, it's Christmas time, so we're going to look at my vocal production session for the song I did, Santa BZB Tonight. And if you want to check out the music video I did for the song, the link will be in the card and down in the description. But for now, welcome to the session. As you can see, these are all the vocals for the song, and they've all been recorded through my Rode NT1A mic going straight into Apollo. No additional processing has been applied during the vocal recording session apart from a high-pass filter. So what you get as the result is a very modern sounding vocals with nothing vintage about it.
Busy, busy, busy bee tonight. Santa is busy, do you think he might have enough time to come by to give us some love?
It's important to underline at this point that for songs like Santa BZB Tonight that have a lot of jazz and bossa nova influences in them, nailing down the emotion and delivery of each line is paramount to make it fit into the vibe of the track. And because at the current time, there are no plugins on the market that can manipulate the emotion of the vocals, you really need to work on the delivery on the recording stage before you move onto the production. As you can see, all of my lead vocals are routed onto the all vocals bus, where the main shaping and rounding of the tone is taking place. But look at this. There is a track containing the majority of the lead vocal line, but there are tracks that have only a word, a single phrase, or hold an entire section of the song. And this is a technique that can be useful for you in two cases. Number one, when there is a certain word or a phrase that needs to be processed differently. So the easiest way to go about it is to cut the audio in question, move it to another track, process it the way you want it to be processed, and route it back into the all vocals bus. And then you're done. Case number two is when you need to swap up an entire section of a song for a better sounding take taken from a different vocal session. This time you will have to process it differently because now you're aiming to make it coherent with the rest of the performance. When you have something as warm and mellow sounding as Santa BZB Tonight, with its sweet strings, gentle piano, you need your vocals to be as smooth and round as possible. So the first thing I'm going to be addressing here are harsh frequencies. And because I know how my vocals sound through the mic I'm using, I'll be focusing on the area between 2K and 4K hertz. And judging by my experience, I know that this issue is going to be persistent throughout the recording, so the following plug-in chain is going to go on the all vocals bus. Back in the day when I was producing this, I didn't have Soothe. So for those of you who don't have Soothe, this might be useful to you. Remember, this is a friendly warning. This does take a lot of patience before you nail this technique down. I'm using iZotope's Neutron EQ for this. I'm cutting away any harsh and whiny frequencies in my vocals with a very narrow band EQs, and you can easily overdo it. You can either cut too much or use too many bands for this, and then your vocals start to sound like they've been put through a phaser. We don't need that. Next, I'm using the same Neutron EQ but in the dynamic mode, and dynamic EQ means that it will subtract frequencies only when they exceed a certain threshold. So this makes it sound very musical. Please don't be freaked out by the look of the plugin. Because you have to remember, we're not listening with our eyes, we're listening with our ears. So ultimately, it doesn't matter how it looks on the plugin. What matters is how it sounds. And if it sounds good to you, it's probably the right move to make. As we take care of our harshness, our vocals will understandably start to sound a bit lifeless. So what we need to do? We need to bring back that life into the recording. I'm using Pultec EQ to boost around 8K, and then I'm attenuating around 60 Hz. This will make my low end sound a bit rounder. Then we're moving on to compressors. I'm using 1176 and follow it up by a Fairchild compressor. Those of you who watched my video on compressor types know exactly why I chose these particular compressors. Those of you who didn't, I will leave a comment, a link down below for you to check it out. But for now, I'll just say that at this point, we're not so much concerned about controlling the sound as much as what kind of emotion and color compressor brings to your performance. And I have to say, compressors, they can be very emotional creatures, so be mindful of that. Last but not least on our list of plugins is a de-esser. Again, I'm using a Isotopes de-esser. It's a very intuitive one. You just choose the frequency band you want it to affect, and then you drop the threshold until you're satisfied with the result. As to individual tracks, the processing will largely depend on your source's needs, and usually it's the variation of the same plugin chain, but sometimes, like here, you'll see I have only gain plugin on, or here I've disabled every plugin I had, because you need to recognize when over-processing your vocals ultimately does more harm than good to the final product. But let's go back to the track that holds the majority of the lead line. Here, I'm relying heavily on dynamic EQ, and I'm using a free dynamic EQ for that. It's DTR Nova by Tokyo Dawn Labs. And what's good about this EQ, besides it being free, of course, is that it's less CPU hungry compared to other dynamic EQ plugins I have. And sometimes CPU appetites of a plugin can be a deal breaker when you choose which plugin to pick for your project. I'm focusing on taming down plosives and fricatives, or cleaning up any boxiness or muddiness with this EQ. And because it's so musical, I'm not worried if it will cut too much or too little. I set it up just the way I like it. And as you can see, I'm not worried about any harshness here because we've took care of it on the all vocals plugin already. So that's good, right? As to individual tracks and compressors, I'm using compressors here only for control, hence very fast attack and low ratio. That means that we're catching the peaks really fast, almost instantly, but we're not slamming them down hard. We're padding them, and that sounds very musical as well. As to the effect sense for the lead, I'm using a single hall reverb with external and internal filtering enabled. And in other words, I have an EQ plugin before the sound goes into the reverb, and then I shape the reverb sound inside the plugin itself. Then there is a de-esser and a sidechain compressor. I'm sidechaining to the dry lead vocal sound, and that helps me to bring the reverb sound behind the lead vocal. But notice that I have a very fast release, and that means that the tail of my reverbs will bloom in between the words and phrases, creating a sort of ambiance. Next, we have a standard stereo delay. It's from Logic. It's set to quarter and eighth note, and again, I'm filtering it a little bit, followed by a de-esser, of course. You might ask me, why do we need to filter our reverbs and delays? And the answer is simple. We need them to be clean, but stay behind the lead vocals, not to muddy up the performance. They are there to enhance the performance, not to muddy it up, okay? Then there is a parallel compression bus, and this is designed to help my vocals cut through the mix a little bit better. In the nutshell, it's a very aggressive compressor followed by a limiter, and what it does, it turns your audio into a sort of a brick. On its own, sounds horrible, but when you mix it in a slight amounts, it will help your vocals stand a bit taller in the mix, if you know what I mean. Background vocal processing chain is pretty straightforward. So we need a compressor to glue the layers together, static EQ to shape it the way we want it, a dynamic EQ to fix any build-up frequencies, and this is particularly true for lower mids, so be careful with that. Then there is a compressor, and you guessed it, it is for color. And a straight, gentle DS, so we don't need any S sounds in there. As to the effect sounds for the background vocals, we still are using the same whole reverb and the stereo delay we use for our lead because we need to put them in the same virtual space. But I wanted to make my background vocals a bit juicier, so I added a short plate reverb with, again, internal filtering and a de-esser. If you were wondering, there is no additional processing on the individual tracks for the background vocals. And as to ad-libs, except for the individual compressors, there are no additional processing there as well. And all the compressors are used for control. It's a fast attack, medium to slowish release, and very low ratio. And all the ad-libs are routed back into the all vocals bus, so there is no need to show it again. And that's it. Everything else inside this vocal production is achieved through simple gain automation, a highly effective yet criminally underrated tool in any music producer's arsenal. Well, I guess what I really want you to take away from this video, apart from how powerful a dynamic EQ can be, is the general logic behind my vocal processing. Because when you have a destination in mind, and for Santa BZB tonight, it was warm, round, and intimate sounding vocals, you can set up your vocal processing in stages, from the macro or the big picture where you shape and color the vocal tone, to micro controls designed specifically to tailor certain sounds and vowels and phrases within the vocal performance. But remember to set up the big picture first and zoom in later. That's it for now. I hope this little deep dive into vocal production for Santa BZB tonight was helpful to you, and you will produce your magical sounding vocals from now on. But for now, if you want to check my music videos for my other Christmas songs, you're welcome to do so. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Merry Christmas. Bye!
Yuvelir, Iris, Yuvelir, 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 Iris, Yuvelir.